Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons Ask Judy, where I take your questions and do my best to answer them. If you are enjoying all of these Waltons tidbits, please like and subscribe. All right, here we go with another question. This one is from Dave. Dave wanted to know if I ever got starstruck. Yes. I mean, I have people I've admired their work and watched their work, and so sometimes when I meet certain people, I get totally starstruck. Because I worked in television and not film, I haven't met as many like major A-list celebrities and stars and stuff. So sometimes when I meet people like that, I'm pretty tongue-tied. I remember meeting Harrison Ford and just being tongue-tied and, babbling. I either get completely tongue-tied and don't know what to say, or I babble. Either one of which are really smooth. I remember another circumstance that happened one time. We did a CBS 50th anniversary special. CBS did a 2-hour special where they gathered together stars from the first 50 years of CBS shows. And it was really a who's who. I mean, people like Lucille Ball and Alfred Hitchcock and Walter Cronkite and just major, major stars. And we were part of it. We were invited because the Waltons was a part of the CBS lineup. And there was a point when they were putting together, they had all these bleachers, and they got all the actors together and they put us on these bleachers and took this big photo, which I have hanging on my wall. It's amazing. It's a who's who. But there were all kinds of people that I was just like, giddy, like, oh, there's so-and-so and there's that person, and oh my goodness, and Lassie was there, and but Cicely Tyson was there, and she of course had just done Roots and was this big emerging star, and I'd watched Roots and loved it, and of course Ralph Waite had a role in it that was very different than John Walton, and Cicely Tyson was running around getting everybody's autograph, and I thought, but you're Cicely Tyson. You want my autograph? I was just so honored and humbled by that. So things like that always touch me. Stephanie asked me to talk about rehearsals. There wasn't a lot of rehearsal because things happen so fast. And when you do a TV series, like with the Waltons, it runs for a long time. You get to know the characters so well. We knew who our characters were. We knew what the relationship was with all the other characters. So we didn't have to figure that sort of thing out. Rehearsal usually consisted of more working out where the camera was going to be, what our physical movements were going to be, a little bit of how the scene was going to play. But mostly, unless the director had a specific piece of information for you, we kind of knew how our interaction went with each other. More likely, the actors might choose to do that on their own. Might be like, hey, can we just sit over here and run the scene a few times, which we might do. Otherwise, that was pretty much it on rehearsals. Sometimes it just, didn't happen. Things moved too fast. So you as an actor had to do your own homework and be prepared to come in there and just film. So thanks for your question. Steve asked, which celebrity cameo, like guest star, got you the most excited when you heard or saw them? Ron Howard, Sissy Spacek, Jonathan Banks, Kim Carath, Jonathan Frakes, Stephen Collins, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Linda Pearl, Ned Beatty. Obviously we had an amazing array of guest stars that came in and worked on our show. In the majority of cases, these people that came in, they were at a point in their career where they had not become a big name yet. So we kind of caught them on the early end. Sometimes there were people that had already had, really extensive careers. And sometimes I knew about it, sometimes I didn't. I remember when Jean Marsh came in, although I'd heard of Upstairs, Downstairs, I'd never seen it, but I understood that she had had a very prominent career already. So with someone like Sissy Spacek, this was very early in her career. So she was lovely to work with, but it wasn't like I was like, oh my goodness, that's Sissy Spacek. So same thing with Jonathan Banks or Jonathan Frakes. Ron Howard, however, had already done the Andy Griffith Show, and I'd already kind of grown up watching him. So I was probably a little like, oh, wow, it's Ron Howard, So that one I was kind of probably, most impressed with because I knew who he was and I'd seen him. So thanks, Steve. Appreciate the question. Next question is from Mike. He says, were there ever scripts that were written that were never filmed? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there very well may have been, but if they were written and never filmed, then they never made it to the actors. So it wasn't like I was given a script and then said, oh, no, we're not going to film that. Because we really only got the scripts maybe, if we were lucky, a week before we started filming, usually within a few days before we started filming. So by that time, they were pretty much committed to, we're going to film this. But behind the scenes, there may have been scripts that came in that they went, no, not working, we're not going to do it. Second part of his question was, were there ever episodes that started off as written for one character as the focal point, but were changed for another? For example, Mary Ellen falls in love, and before filming, someone says, this is not a Mary Ellen episode, this is an Erin episode. Again, not in a script that I saw. So if that happened, it may have been in the preliminary development of the script where there was a concept and it went out a particular way, and then somewhere along the way, it was determined that it was more of a Erin story than a Mary Ellen story. So, would be more of a question for, the script editors or something like that. So if I ever get a chance to ask that question, I'll try and get back to you with the answer. Thanks. I had another question that was asking about whether the kids were allowed time for play. Not specifically, but because there were scenes we weren't in. And during the school term, if we weren't on set filming, then we were required to do 3 hours of schoolwork a day, which we did at the studio during the time that filming was in play, so which was about 9 months out of the year. So during school term, then we would go back to school in between, and if we were done with school for the day, then we might have downtime where we could kind of goof off between scenes. In the summer, when we didn't have school, then we had more downtime in between. One of the things that I particularly remember was that there was a point in time where the kids got together and created sort of a little short film. I believe it was called The Phantom of the Studio. And someone had a camera, one of the kids, and we wrote a script and we ran around the studio lot and filmed it. And I don't remember who ended up with it, one of the boys. So I'll have to check into that, but we had a lot of fun making it. I mean, what was tricky was that once you were in makeup and hair for the day, you couldn't mess around too much and really destroy your hair and makeup. So within reason, and if you were in wardrobe, you had to make sure that you didn't rip or, get your clothes too dirty. So we had a little bit of restrictions there. It was much tougher on the younger kids. And I know Cammie has talked about how messy her hair was because she was so young that she really wasn't thinking about it. I got to keep my hair neat. But that was something that sometimes happened more with those of us whose parents were there would be like, oh my goodness, you're a mess. We better straighten you up. I was a little older, so I was a little more personally conscious of that sort of thing. But, filming was fun for us too. So the whole day was kind of like playing, even though there was work and it was hard work and it was tiring at times and it was monotonous at times, but I still loved it. And I think we all did. This next question is from Jared. He says, after the series ended on CBS, there were 3 movies that aired on NBC the following season. Were all of these filmed back to back? Yes, they were. And was there hope that NBC would ask for more or even do a new series? Yeah, I think there was some hope. I thought it would be really cool if NBC picked up the series or some spin-off of it or something like that. But obviously that didn't happen. We did the 3 for NBC, and then it went back to CBS for the final 3 TV movies that we did in the 90s. And then this question, asking about wondering if the Waltons shot at locations other than the Warner Brothers Studios back lot, or as it was called, the Burbank Studios back then. And did the production ever shoot at what must have been known at the time as the Columbia Ranch? So yes, For some reason, the Warner Brothers Studios changed names to the Burbank Studios at some point and then changed back to Warner Brothers. So that's where we were based in terms of the filming. The sound stages that we worked on, Stage 26, that was at Warner Brothers. We used what was called Midwest Street. We used the back lot. We used what was called Western Street, the jungle, which is where Drusilla's Pond was. All those things were on the back lot. Midwest Street housed like the schoolroom and Kurt's and Mary Ellen's house, Kurt's office and later Mary Ellen's house, and various different other Mrs. Brimmer's house, things like that. Godse's store was on the very back lot where the house was, where Drusilla's Pond was, and where the church was that didn't have the steps going up to it. That was right on the back lot there. We did occasionally shoot at what is called the Columbia Ranch, which is just a few blocks away from Warner Brothers. At a point, there was a fire on the back lot of Warner Brothers and the house burned down. They rebuilt that on the back lot, and that was before we did some of the last reunion movies. Then at one point, they basically tore down all the sets that were on the back lot of Warner Brothers and turned that into office buildings, parking lots, and stuff like that for the production going on. And at that point, they moved the Walton exterior of the house over to this Columbia Ranch. So for the very last reunion that we did, we shot the exteriors of the house over there at Columbia Ranch, which is why, if you notice, the configuration of the front yard looked different, the barn placement was different, the mill, just there was a different sort of spacing over there, and it wasn't as expansive, so we had to, the art department, the construction department had to reconfigure to make all that work. It was what it was. We were just happy to be back filming in front of the house, wherever it was located. We also occasionally went out to local location, Franklin Canyon, which is pretty much at the intersection of Mulholland and Coldwater Canyon for people who know the LA area. There's a reservoir there. So we would use that sometimes. And then we would go out to Frazier Park, which is 90 couple hours or something like that, north of Los Angeles, when we needed more expansive stuff, when we needed really the big pine trees. So those were the primary other locations that we would use on somewhat of a regular basis. We usually only went to Frazier Park maybe a couple times a season, maybe once. Franklin Canyon, maybe a bit more, but we did the majority of it, on the studio lot. That's what I have for this segment of Ask Judy. I will be back with more of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, talking about different episodes, cast members, and back with more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.